Hola, bienvenidos a Libroteca. Hoy tenemos un programa especial dedicado a un gran escritor que ya es un ícono de la literatura norteamericana contemporánea. Nada menos que Paul Auster, de quien debo confesar que soy muy, pero muy fan. Auster es autor de novelas como El Palacio de la Luna, El País de las Últimas Cosas, la Trilogía de Nueva York, en la que reinventó el género policial, pero además es guionista y dirigió sus propias películas. En la primera parte de la entrevista hablamos con él sobre sus comienzos como escritor, cuando nadie quería publicarlo y fue rechazado por 17 editoriales, y también sobre su último libro, 4321, una novela de casi 1000 páginas en la que imagina distintas vidas posibles para un mismo personaje y vuelve a uno de sus temas recurrentes, las distintas formas en las que se manifiesta el azar. Es una entrevista imperdible. Los dejo con Paul Auster. And I don't know if you're aware of this, but here in the 90s, reading Paul Auster was like the perfect way to seduce a young reader.
Really?
Yeah.
You mean boys seducing girls, girls
And
seducing boys? Yes?
Yeah, it really worked for me.
Well, I'm glad. You know, anything that can bring people together makes me happy, I have to say.
And which are the authors that marked you? Where you were young?
When I was young? Oh, that's a great question. Dostoevsky was the big thing for me at 15, reading Crime and Punishment. I had been writing up till then, a lot. I always was writing from the time I was about 9 or 10. But when I read Crime and Punishment, it was such a big experience. I thought, if this is what a book can be, I want to write books. That's when I decided I wanted to be a writer, not just for fun, but for my whole life. So, I mean, who was I reading then? I mean, I remember liking Salinger very much when I was 14. Catcher in the Rye was a big experience. You know, finally a book that spoke directly to adolescent problems and the adolescent imagination. I liked Hemingway very much, Fitzgerald, Faulkner, the Americans, and then, of course, by the time I got to be 17 or 18, the reading just got very much wider. Russians, French, people from all over, British writers.
Well, and you imagined four life versions of the same character. Which was the most exciting part of that process?
Oh, I don't know. I think it was just getting the idea in the first place. It was very exciting for me. I've never written a book until now in which I had a formal idea that came before the story I wanted to tell.
Not even in the New York trilogy?
No. It's all, books grow very organically for me. Often has to do with just a tone, the music of the language that I want to write. I have a feeling about it, and bit by bit it grows. And then the material has always shaped the form. But here I had this formal idea, parallel lives, same person. But what's so strange is once I had that idea, within an hour, I knew it was Archie Ferguson. And I had this character inside me without even realizing it. And so I got to work quite quickly and just started writing blindly to see what would happen. And I just kept going. And the whole book was improvised. I didn't have a plan. I just made it up from day to day.
And can you identify a moment in your life in which if you had made another choice, you wouldn't become a writer?
Wouldn't become a writer? No, I can't imagine it. I think...
In a parallel life, like
no,
if you...
It's because there were so many things that happened in my life that told me not to be a writer, that I could have been dissuaded from doing it, but I kept doing it.
Which things?
I think, well, just the fact that nobody wanted to publish me in the beginning, and it was I had a very rough start.
How many years were you trying to publish without being published?
Well, listen, I was publishing poetry in very small magazines and very small publishers when I was in my 20s. But when I first, when I wrote I see you have the New York trilogy here. The first volume, City of Glass, It was turned down by 17 New York publishers. So the New
How
York
many?
17. And
What those people reading or doing with their lives?
they thought it was too strange. And a lot of them said it's beautifully written, it's really interesting, but the ending is so bizarre, we would like you to change the ending, and then we'll publish it. I said, I'm not going to. So the irony is that the New York trilogy was published by a publisher from Los Angeles. Huh?
Weird.
New York, LA, right?
In many of your novels, there are young characters. What attracts you more about that stage in life?
Well, it's funny. Lately, there have been young characters. Earlier on, most of my characters were roughly my age. You know, when I was in my 30s, there would be characters in their 30s and 40s. And then it seemed as I was getting older, I wrote a lot of books about old men. You know, there was a whole series of books. And then starting with, well, I guess the dividing line came with the Brooklyn Follies, which is my one comedy, the one book I tried to write as a comedy. Nathan Glass, he's 60, and he thinks he's dying. And after that book, the next novel, I had some more old men, and then in those two little books, Travels in the Scriptorium, Man in the Dark, and then Invisible, young, Sunset Park, young. And then the two books preceding 4321, which were autobiographical books, not novels, Winter Journal and Report from the Interior, those are the two in which I wasn't writing about being 20. I was going back for the first time in my adult life and thinking about my childhood seriously. And I found things. It was interesting. There were things that I didn't know I knew that were still there and I could find. It's like archaeological dig, going down under the surface and finding these remnants of my life, because even you, young as you are, I'm sure about 80% of your childhood is forgotten. And then you remember really key moments. Sometimes you misremember them, but you still remember the emotional impact. So I think writing those two autobiographical books plowed the ground for this. If I hadn't written those, I wouldn't have written this novel. But then the world of childhood became so fascinating, and I thought, maybe I want to explore this in a novel too. So my first impulse, writing the book, was I'm going to take them into their old age, all four of them. But as I started writing, I realized, no, it's a book about human development and youth, and up to 20, 22, that's it. First 20 years of the life, that's what I was going to focus on.
Hasta acá la primera parte de la entrevista con Paul Auster. En el próximo bloque seguimos conversando con él sobre la situación política y cultural de su país y sobre el auge del feminismo. Ya volvemos. Paul Auster es uno de los autores más leídos de las últimas décadas y es una lectura compartida por varias generaciones que fueron creciendo con sus libros. En 2006 ganó el Premio Príncipe de Asturias de las Letras y cada año su nombre vuelve a sonar entre los candidatos al Premio Nobel. En la segunda parte de la entrevista hablamos con él sobre el derecho al aborto, sobre Estados Unidos, un país al que considera profundamente antiintelectual, y sobre la literatura como arte, que según él es el único espacio en el que dos personas completamente desconocidas pueden encontrarse íntimamente. No se pierdan la última parte de la entrevista con Paul Auster. How is to be a writer nowadays in the USA with such an anti-intellectual president as Donald Trump?
Well, let me put it this way. America has always been an anti-intellectual country. What you're seeing now is just more of the same when it comes to intellectual activities. There's always been suspicion and contempt for learning. It's strange to say.
Why do you think that happens?
Yeah, it would take us too long to go in, but it is a strain in American life, and I mean, even historians have written books about, you know, the American anti-intellectualism. But it's worse now in the sense that I've noticed, and I'm trying to articulate this feeling. We've always had very fine writers in the United States, and we've had in the past writers who have had some kind of presence in the public's mind. But now, I would say in the last 30 years or so, it's particularly changed in the way that writers are no longer part of the national conversation. Ordinary Americans, educated Americans, don't know who the writers are anymore, and they don't read them that much. We're talking about movies all the time. We love our movie stars. These are the great heroes of American cultural life. We know about our pop singers, but we don't even know who's doing anything in theater. Dance is very marginal, and writing poetry and literary fiction, it's just something that a small sliver of the public is interested in. They're very passionate, and because America is such a big place, the numbers are fairly big, but the percentage is tiny, and so writers are marginalized now.
But it's because the writers don't want to speak of public matters anymore, or it's because they are not
I think writers are perfectly happy to speak up. It's no one's asking them to. For example, during a time of the election, in 16 and into early 17, I was on British television about 4 times, just to talk about politics. And I was happy to do it, and I had plenty of things to say, but no American TV would ever ask me or any other writer to say anything about these matters.
How do you see the current state of feminism?
Oh, it's in tremendous transition right now. All kinds of things are happening, and in an astonishing way, I think. Now, I live, of course, with Siri Hustvedt, the writer, and Siri is an ardent feminist and has written and written and written much about all of these matters, and we talk about it constantly. And of course, too, we have a daughter who's 30 years old, Sophie Auster, who's out there as an adult. She's a singer and a songwriter and having her career and facing all the problems women face in all different domains. And I think the conversation has gotten more intense, and women are speaking out in the United States in ways that was not true even 3 or 4 years ago. I think even in Argentina, things are changing, aren't they? A little bit?
Yeah, it is,
yes.
a lot.
Yeah.
We are fighting for the right of
for abortion. Yes,
yeah.
I know. And the vote is pretty soon, isn't it?
We hope so.
Yeah.
I hope so.
Yeah. The people I was talking to these last days said, probably won't get through this time, but maybe next time. I hope. We'll see.
When you read Siri's book, The Summer Without Men,
yeah.
that she talks about, well, men privileges and egos. Did you feel challenged at any point?
No, because the book, it's a very good comedy, this book. It's very funny, the book, and I found it hilarious, and I think I like all her novels very much, but this one I also just felt, and you should wait to see her new book. She's finished the new novel, and it's so beautifully done, and it's so multi-layered and it's the story of a young woman looking back. I mean, an older woman looking back at her younger self. So you have these 2 generations, but it's the same person, and the evolving thinking about what it is to be a woman in the United States.
Well, we'll read it soon.
You'll be reading it as soon as it's out, yeah.
Paul, what do you think literature is for?
That's a big question. That's what Sartre asked, you know? He wrote that book way back. Well, the funny thing is, it's really not for anything. I mean, it certainly has no practical use. Art in general has no practical use. It doesn't help feed hungry children. It doesn't stop bombs from falling on cities at war. And books don't do anything. But books, for me, are the one place, and I'm talking about novels now and poetry, it's the one place, I think, in the whole world where two people who are absolute strangers to each other can meet in terms of absolute intimacy. And therefore, it's a special place where you as a human being can go and to share your life and thoughts and history with the writer. And together you make the book. Every reader reads a different book. It's one-on-one. It's a very personal experience. So I think by entering into the imagination of another person and participating and collaborating with it, you begin to understand more about your own humanity, I think. That's probably what it does. Also, if you're sensitive to language, the words can give pleasure, physical pleasure, the way music can give pleasure. And then there are the stories in novels, and if they're good stories, you carry them around for the rest of your life. You might not remember every detail of the book, but the general feeling, the spirit of it, or the character, what that character embodies for you. And you can then look at the real world and think, oh yes, that person is doing exactly what that character in the novel did, you know, that Henry James wrote 120 years ago. And how interesting, you know. So
yeah, it certainly happens to me 20 years after reading your text.
Yeah, good.
You wrote several scripts for cinema, and you wrote your own movies, but you also did this thing with an introduction of Art Spiegelman.
I didn't do it.
You didn't do it.
No, this is it. Art Spiegelman is a great friend of mine, and we've been friends for a long time, because this, I think it was 1994 when that first came out.
Yeah.
So Art was always after me to do a graphic novel. He wanted me to write one. And I was tempted, but I never really had an idea. And I said, I don't know, Art, I don't think so. He said, okay, I'll tell you what, why don't we adapt one of your books? I said, good, fine, I'd be very curious to see what happened. So he got the two people, Karasik and Mazzucchelli, who are the people who made it. Karasik adapted it, and Mazzucchelli did the drawings. And so we had one meeting, the four of us, because Art was like the godfather of the project. And I said to the two of them, I said, I know you have to reduce it, so take out anything you need to take out. I said, the only thing I ask you is don't put in any words that are not in the novel.
Okay.
Don't add any new words. They said, fine.
You can take away
You can
words,
take away,
but
don't put in your own words. Just take words from the book. That was easy enough to do. The result, I think, is pretty remarkable. It's like looking at the storyboards of a really interesting film, I think.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
But still, your well-known novels are not adapted into film. I'm sure you had many offers.
One, The Music of Chance was made into a film.
Just that.
Just that. Well, I can tell you that for years people tried, and as always happens, for one reason or another, the projects didn't happen. And then there was a long period I said, I don't want any films of my books. So I refused. But it seems that, now it's funny, being here in Argentina, I was first here 16 years ago, and I met a young filmmaker, who was very young back then, Alejandro Chomsky, and he wanted to do an adaptation of In the Country of Last Things. And I gave him permission to do it. He seemed so enthusiastic, and he wrote a good script. And for 16 years, he's been trying to make this film. I think it's going to happen now.
Yeah.
In Spanish, to be filmed.
Here, in Argentina.
The Dominican Republic, of all places, sometime in the fall. I mean, I saw him yesterday, and he said it seems that it's happening, that there's a fund in the Dominican Republic for films. It seems that this project has qualified, but who knows, maybe it won't work. But today it sounds good,
Yeah.
and it seems that they'll be making this movie within the next few months. I'll be curious to see it. I'm not involved, but I wish him good luck.
We hope to. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you.
Llegamos al final del programa y confieso que voy a tener que recuperarme después de haber entrevistado a uno de mis ídolos literarios, porque no todos los días uno se puede sentar a conversar con Paul Auster. Es uno de esos lujos que nos damos acá en Libroteca. La semana que viene el programa va a estar dedicado a uno de los grandes escritores y cronistas de la Argentina, Martín Caparrós, que habla de literatura, política y vuelve a poner el dedo en la llaga en un tema que parecía saldado: el número de desaparecidos durante la última dictadura militar en Argentina.
Yo tengo problemas con ese tema porque estoy en contra de la ritualización, por decirlo de algún modo. Me parece que 30.000 se transformó en un ensalmo ritual. Y a mí me gusta poder cuestionar las cosas, no sacralizarlas.
Si quieren ver los programas anteriores, pueden entrar al YouTube del canal de la ciudad. Nosotros nos encontramos la semana que viene con más Libroteca.